A very good afternoon to all our viewers today. Today, we have with us a very inspiring lady. She is a co founder, an investor, entrepreneur, and an author, everything together. She's a president of LightPost Capital, an investment and acquisition firm, a co founder of Impact Experience, which advances equity across climate, healthcare, education, and investments. She's also the best selling author of Enlightened Bottom Line, exploring the intersection of spirituality, business, and investing, an active angel investor who has supported three unicorns. She holds an MBA from Stanford Graduate Business School, a BA in International Relation with Stanford, and has been recognized as 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs. And I can just keep going on. Let us all welcome Jenna Nicholas. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
It's an honor to have you with us, Jenna. Just to start with, I would like to know what was your interest in the impact investment and what has been your journey in this space?
Sure. So my whole career has been in the area of social responsible investing. I grew up in London. I came out and did my undergrad and MBA at Stanford. And it was really during my time at Stanford that I first learned about this whole concept of social responsible investing and having the opportunity to then live in DC and China and work with the Calvert Fund as one of the pioneers in the area of social responsible investing. And really over the last 15 years, seeing the growth of the whole field of social responsible investing. I currently lead a firm called LightPost Capital, where we do early stage investing and lower middle market M&A, all with an impact focus. So a lot looking at AI with the intersection of climate and healthcare and education. And yeah, it's just I think really exciting and inspiring to be able to engage in this type of work.
Excellent. And would you like to share more on the book that you've authored?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I published a book that came out a couple of months ago. It's called Enlightened Bottom Line, and it's all focused on exploring the intersection of spirituality, business, and investing. And it's based on a series of interviews with different investors and business leaders about how they've integrated purpose and spirituality into their work and lives. And there's a framework that I present in the book called the HEAL framework that stands for hope, empathy, abundance, and legacy. And these were many of the themes that emerged in many of the conversations that it's having. And really is like, how do we create a space to build bridges between these different parts of ourselves and to build organizations that are based on really being able to bring the fullness of our values into our work and lives.
That's very inspiring. And I would like to understand from you, what does enlightened investor look in the practical decision making firm?
Yeah, I think in a really practical sense, it's like having the intentionality around thinking about. I'm part of the Baha'i community, and there's this concept in the Baha'i writings around everything leaving a trace, and really thinking about what is the trace that we're trying to leave, and in making those decisions, both from an investment perspective as well as from a business perspective, of really thinking about what is the legacy that we're leaving. One example that I love to share of a company that I had a chance to invest in. It's called Devoted Health, and they recently raised a round at a $13 billion valuation, have been very successful in the healthcare space, and they credit a lot of their success to a simple exercise, which is they have all of their healthcare providers, before they engage with any of the patients that they interact with, they have them imagine that the person they're about to interact with is a beloved family member. And it's a simple practice, and yet they argue that so much of their success is really because of seeing this interconnectedness that we all have as human beings. And I love that example. I think it's something that we can engage around as we're making investments, as we're making broader business decisions, to really think about what is this common humanity and how do we show up from that space.
Excellent. Now, many investors separate personal values from portfolio strategy. You argue for integration. How can capital allocation become a reflection of inner conviction rather than external pressures, according to you?
Mm. Yeah, I think this is a really important one in terms of really carving out the space for reflecting both individually and organizationally on our values and how they're showing up. One of the examples that I love around this is a foundation that we do some work with. They recently shared that before they went into their investment committee making process, they actually read an excerpt from the book and of taking this time to actually create space for people to be able to share, what's truly important to them. What are the values that animate their decision making? So we don't, Parker Palmer wrote a book called Divided No More. And I think these elements of how are we no longer creating a separation between our values and our work self, but really seeing how each can and should reinforce each other.
That's a very insightful take. Now, I have a personal question for you. Now, do you believe in spirituality? And do you think that spirituality can be institutionalized within large funds and private equity firms, or does it remain an individual leadership responsibility?
Yeah, I really do believe in spirituality, and I often I come back to the word spiritual coming from the word spiritus in Latin, which means breath, and this idea of how are we breathing new life into the organizations and communities that we're part of, and a lot of reflections are on this intersection between individual growth and transformation and organizational structures and kind of institutional structures, and I think ultimately institutions are made up of individuals, right? So if we can really have this opportunity to connect more deeply to our values and to our why, then that can then be infused into the broader institutions and organizations that we're part of. And it's really that interplay between the two. There's a line in the Baha'i writings that it says, a human being molds the environment and is deeply affected by it. The one acts upon the other, and every abiding change in the life of a human is the result of these mutual interactions. And so I think a lot in terms of the organizations that we're part of are both how are we shaping them, but also how are we being shaped by them at the same time.
Oh, that's so wonderful saying. I hope that all the venture capitalist firm believe and follow these principles. Now, you have also worked on green bonds at the World Bank and divest invest strategies with foundations. Where do you see the greatest leverage point today for shifting mainstream capital towards climate positive investments?
Mm. Yeah, this is a great one. I think that, there's been some really powerful push factors in the direction of more and more capital being flowing in this direction. I think one of them is with the intergenerational wealth transfer that's taking place, and more interest from the next generation in having an alignment between values and investments. And I think that's showing up in terms of clients putting pressure onto their financial advisors and on the firms to have more impact oriented products. And I think all of that is really helpful in terms of lowering the barriers to entry for people to engage in these types of solutions. And I think with so much of the development and build out around data centers, so people looking at solutions around how are we modulating the energy use and looking at opportunities for companies that have using AI to do predictive analytics around weather forecasts. So I think that there is some really powerful applications in some themes that we're um, being able to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be a disconnect between these financial returns and social and environmental impact, but really that each can reinforce the other, and that can then make it that much easier for investors to also engage in this work too.
And would you like to share any case study that is close to your heart while you've done this work?
Yeah, many companies that come to mind. One that I'll share is a company called Isusu that supports people on the pathway towards home ownership. They do so through using rental score data as part of the credit score assessment. So a really powerful application. And they've recently raised around a $1.2 billion valuation. I had a chance to invest in them. So I think companies like that are, again, really demonstrating this collinearity between financial returns and social and environmental impact.
Excellent. Now, impact investing has moved from niche to mainstream largely. What risks concern you most as more capital flows into the impact label?
I think one of the really important aspects of this work is when we look at the investment industry, it's $82 trillion. Less than 2% is invested into women and people of color run companies and funds. So I think it's a really important element as we have more and more people entering the impact investing space, that this continues to be a consideration as a really important factor as part of our broader decision making. And it's both what are the sectors that we're investing in, but also who are the people that we're investing in as well, as being a really important consideration. I think also, how do we create the opportunity for democratizing access to these types of solutions so that it's not just something that's available to more high net worth individuals, but kind of really possibilities for people of all different backgrounds, and really enabling people of all different backgrounds and perspectives to know that this is something that they can be thinking about as part of their portfolio, and that there are opportunities kind of across asset classes to be considering these themes and sectors.
Excellent. So yeah, inclusivity is very much important in the times that we are living in, especially for the women and other founders. Now, through impact experience, you advance equity across climate, healthcare, education, and investments. How do you measure whether equity is truly embedded in the investments? These theses rather than appended as a reporting metric?
This is a really important one. We about 10 years ago, I co-founded an organization called Impact Experience, where we do a lot of work to bring together groups of investors and entrepreneurs and artists and communities that have been overlooked and underestimated. And a lot of that work is around deepening people on their equity journey. And as part of that, a lot of it is looking at what is the historical context of how do we get to where we are right now as it relates to these inequities, and what does that mean moving forward in terms of how we engage around these themes, and how do we influence these sectors as they continue to develop. And I think it's really looking at what are the structural ways in which people are, whether it's within their board selection, their hiring, their investment decision making, really going through the process of looking at how is equity being embedded into each of those aspects of their work.
That's very well said. I have a follow-up question. When you are investing, do you also look at the impact report of the company? Do they measure? Do they have their metrics that this much they have done the impact, and do they present you?
Yeah, I think that's a really important aspect, is the impact assessment process. And some have their own standards and ways of engaging around this. I think others use things like the B impact assessment process, or the Global Impact Investing Network with the impact reporting investment standards. Or there's a company that does some work with called Purposefy that helps to support companies in the process of measuring and tracking and reporting on their social and environmental impact. I think all of these tools are really important in terms of, in the same way that we can report on our financial outcomes, how are we doing something equivalent as it relates to thinking about our social and environmental outcomes. So definitely think all of those tools are really important.
That's a very well put up point. So anyone who's coming to you, they also need to get their impact report.
It's definitely a really helpful part of the narrative, for sure.
Yeah. Now, if the next decade determines whether capitalism becomes regenerative or extractive, what role should impact investors play in redefining long-term value creation?
So I think impact investors play a really important role in shaping many of these topics within the broader economy. And I think that particularly this frame around more extractive to more regenerative. I think part of what we really try to do with our investments is really see our work at LightPost Capital as a living laboratory for many of the principles that we explore in the book. So some of these principles around the HEAL framework of hope and empathy and abundance and legacy. And I think all of those ways of engaging and thinking about business building are a part of a more regenerative economics and more regenerative way of building businesses. And I think for so many investors, like whatever the framework is that they may use, this ability to be able to realize that we have so much impact that we're able to create through the investments that we engage in. And it doesn't have to be the way that we've done things in the past is necessarily the way that we do things in the future. And I think a lot about the indigenous perspective around seven generations thinking and how are we holding the legacy of seven generations in the past, but also thinking about the impact of our decisions for seven generations into the future. So for our great grandchildren's great grandchildren, and having that as a frame for how we think about the decision making we're engaging in.
And that's very well said. Now, all the people who, what would be your message to people who would like to read the book, and what is the outcome that they should expect after going through it and learning more about your work?
Yeah, one of the things that I heard pretty consistently as I was interviewing people for the book is they would say something to the extent of, I don't really feel like I can talk about it, but, and then they would share about these pretty transformational experiences that they had in their lives and how it shaped why they do what they do and the organizations that they're building. And I think really this element of the the book provides both a framework, but at the end of each chapter, I also have a series of questions that people can reflect on in terms of how to think about integrating some of these concepts into their work and life. So I think that for people reading the book, it's both being less alone and trying to navigate some of these questions and having a framework and a set of tools that can hopefully make it easier for people in terms of really being proactive and thinking about these elements in their work and life.
And just if possible, would you like to read out any one paragraph, your favorite paragraph from the book?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have a copy of the book here. I might start actually by sharing a quotation that I have in the book that's from Bobby Kennedy. And it's a really powerful one. One of the things we talked a bit about metrics earlier, and one of the things that's really interesting when we think about metrics, while I was at business school at Stanford, I had a chance to lead a trip to Bhutan, and it was all focused around gross national happiness. And in Bhutan, they, rather than focusing on gross domestic product as a measure of success, they focus on measuring gross national happiness. And I think they call them spiritual consultants, but they're people who work within organizations to really support them on the journey of integrating values into their organizations and integrating this concept around happiness. And some of this sort of comes from this critique of, like, Bobby Kennedy in 1968 gave this speech around gross national product. And he said, and I quote this in the book, he said, the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And I love that quotation because I think that we can so often think about, so many of the metrics that we use to think about what success is, and that actually some of the value is in recalibrating what are we actually measuring and how do we ensure that what we're measuring is really aligned with what we're truly trying to optimize for.
Such beautiful lines and words you just said. So beautiful. And how can, would you like to share the Amazon link? Is it available on Amazon link or some other platform where people can go and buy the book?
Yeah, I can definitely share the Amazon link. And also available in on many other formats too, wherever you like to buy your books. But I will post I'll post the one here for Amazon, and then I will also post a link for finding it on other platforms to do that here.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Jean. It has been a pleasure to talk to you. Is there any final message that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, just such a pleasure to connect with you too. I also have a Substack. So we just really encourage people to stay in touch and keep engaged in the conversation. I think so much of this is a kind of iterative journey. And so just excited to be on the journey together and to support each other in this work.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And we wish you the very best in the coming times and more success and more strength to you.